Hey friends, we're going to be talking about a lot of important things on our podcast today, most notably what President Trump deemed Liberation Day. Of course, he was talking about the asymmetrical imbalance that is happening with ourselves and our trading partners around the world as it relates to tariffs. So we're going to talk a little bit about tariffs. Are these good? Are these things bad? We also want to continue to talk about what's happening in the world of transgender sports, men competing in women's sports, and the fallout that's happening there. Lots going on. We're going to talk about free speech. We're going to talk about parental rights. And we're going to talk about all of this from a biblical worldview perspective. You don't want to miss it.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Here we are on this beautiful spring morning in April. I took my jacket off because Pastor Andrew was whining about he saw a couple of, there are a couple of snowflakes coming down.
Yeah, and the 25 miles an hour wind is in my face when I got out of my car.
So I took my jacket off. I want you all to know, as a sign of resistance and as a veteran dweller of Northwest Indiana, I am proclaiming this is not due to climate change. We do not need to crash our environment because we have some snowflakes. This is normal Midwest Indiana weather.
Yeah, you're stunning and brave to resist against the.
This is I'm declaring that spring is coming, and I'm wearing this short sleeve shirt. And anyway, do you remember? I got to tell our listeners. I encouraged Pastor Andrew to come and leave his homeland on the East Coast,
and East Coast America,
to come to East Coast, and to come to a faraway country, and to spend time figuring out who you were and where you were going, and so he lived at the Johnson household for a while. But do you remember the first time you got here? I had to go pick up one of my kids at school.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I pulled into the circle at Crown Point High School, and it was a swirling vortex of snow and wind, and I mean, it looked crazy. It looked like a massive blizzard.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
It was like a snow tornado. Here's the thing: is when you tell someone you're going to move to Indiana, they didn't think you're moving to Antarctica.
Well, what I love though is I look over and you are outside. The doors open of my car, and you have your cell phone, and you're standing out there. I'm like, what are you doing? And you're just capturing this amazing, beautiful.
And back then we had like these crazy snowstorms. Remember, like 3 feet of snow. I remember, your son Johnny.
That was 3 inches, Andrew.
No, I remember your son Johnny was young at a small, 4 years old time. You threw him. I think Joel, your other son, threw him, and poof, you can't even find him anymore. It disappeared. But we haven't had those snowstorms. You don't think that when you think Indiana, right? You think maybe Alaska or
Well, and Matthew can attest to this, our producer. Was it not the case that decades ago we would get lake effect snow, and we get some good snows, but we have not had a good winter. I say good winter. If it's winter, I like it to have some snow. We have really not had much snow, and I bet the last 7, 8, 10 years we've had very marginal amounts of snow. So anyway, I think that's for you.
That was for me. Thank you.
God's blessing you.
Yes.
So anyway, lots to talk about, but let's deal with the immediate home front first.
Yeah.
This coming Sunday, which as this podcast will air is only a few days away, represents a milestone for us because we have been tearing down the northwest corner of our building, which is pretty crazy to go out and see. A lot of demolition. We are getting ready on Sunday to announce the big number, and that number is just simply we've encouraged people to pray and to listen and then to obey whatever the Lord puts in your heart, no matter how crazy it is or out of touch it is or whatever, but just to believe that if it's the Holy Spirit, God's going to have to do it, and He will. And so it's an exciting Sunday because it really represents the rally cry of our church family saying, you know what, we're behind this vision and we're invested and we prayed. And I'm going to be giving that amount on Sunday, which is always a crazy time because we celebrate together just, what God has done through our combined efforts of believing the Lord,
Yeah.
And so I really encourage everybody, come on out. Don't forget to pick up your Arise t-shirt if you haven't yet. For everybody who makes a pledge, we have some really cool t-shirts available.
Yeah, where do we get those shirts?
You can pick them up right at the Connection Center right behind us. And then let's talk a little bit about Easter, because right on the heels of Sunday, we will launch into Easter weekend.
Can you believe it? Easter already.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It really is how fast things are going. So Good Friday, that's always a wonderful night of remembering what Christ has done for us on the cross. We've got 2 services on Good Friday, 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock. We also have 2 services on Saturday, and so we encourage any of you that can come out on Saturday to please do so, because Sunday we're expecting 2 services that are at maximum capacity. So a lot of our regulars will be serving on Sunday, and we encourage you, if you can, to come on Saturday. It's going to be amazing. We got 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and then Sunday as well, our normal, our 2 services on Sunday, 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock.
Our first Easter service in our new sanctuary.
Whoa!
Right? Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah, we got in in July. Yeah. Wow, that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So another history-making Sunday. So praise the Lord for that. I want to get into something that's been in the news a lot. President Trump announced Liberation Day. And that's a strong phrase, liberation from what? And by that he meant to be liberated from the asymmetrical tariffs of the last 50 years. And it was going to inaugurate a new and what he called golden age of trade parity, greater investment in the United States, but mostly greater job opportunities and higher paying jobs for Americans. Of course, this was followed up with the hands-off movement from the left, which has largely been trying to get some traction to protest anything Donald Trump is doing, or mostly not just Trump, but the rage is particularly directed at Elon Musk, which we've talked about in the past. We scratch our heads because exposing waste, fraud, and abuse seems like a good thing, but he has been characterized as a fascist, as a leftist. I even saw one sign that said, socialism is better than fascism. And we would quickly argue both of them are terrible, but we have more socialists in this country than we have fascists, and the fascists are not currently in power if you look at a true definition of fascism. But anyway.
Well, but that sign itself is unheard of decades ago. I'm not saying fascism is good, but for someone to promote socialism?
Right. Well, it just shows you again the absolute brain deadness of a large portion of our country who have been educated in our public universities and really poisoned.
It's not a winning message. You're not going to...
No. And we've really perverted a true biblical understanding of the roots of capitalism. Now, there's crony capitalism. There's a lot of perversion that could happen in capitalism. We get that. But nevertheless... Our free market capitalistic system has led to the greatest prosperity in the history of the world. I think that's a no-brainer to argue. And so it's crazy that young people who are raised in this nation that's been blessed above all nations, and there's reasons why, and they have more liberty, more opportunity, more economic blessing than their counterparts in the world, and yet they want to destroy it all. And they bought into the lie that somehow capitalism produces all kinds of evil. Nevertheless, we're talking about here an economic policy that, again, is being much maligned from everybody on the left, and that is this whole idea of what is this Liberation Day, and what does he mean by asymmetrical tariffs. Now, I was listening to Stephen Miller, and I every time Stephen Miller opens his mouth, and of course for our listeners, Stephen Miller is the Deputy Chief of Staff, the guy knows what he's talking about. He's not looking at notes, he's not reading teleprompters, they ask him questions, and he goes off and builds a profound case. And I watched him do that on this whole issue of tariffs, and basically he began by stating that all of our industry has been sucked out of America and exists overseas, and that our leadership has really allowed that to happen. And the reason that it's happened is because of these asymmetrical tariffs. And what we mean by that is simply, and I'll give an example here, Canada, for instance. Canada is our friends. And we share so many values, or at least in the past, we have shared so many values in common. But in Canada, they are currently running a $63 billion surplus. And some of the tariffs on American products are as high as 250%. Now, why is Canada charging us 250%, increased on certain products or whatever, when the other point he was trying to make was that we protect our allies in Europe, our Canadian allies, our Japanese friends. We are their defense. They don't have. I was watching a parade with the Canadian Army. They couldn't even march together. It looked like some clown show. It was unbelievable. We are their defense, and we protect so many countries, and we're such a massive part of protecting Europe. And then we could go down the list, and we won't bore our listeners with the details. But the point is, we're getting tariffed to death by all of the people that really owe us so much and should be our friends. And as we talked about prior to the show, all this goes back really to post-World War II, when we had great economic surplus, and we were allowing that to happen so that our friends, so to speak, could rebuild their economies. But that's no longer the case. We're trillions of dollars in debt. And what President Trump is trying to do is say, you know what, we just want to simply force you, because we are the economic engine of the world, we want to force you to play fair. And so some of these counter tariffs are really just, I see the genius of Donald Trump, because what he's really saying is, okay, this is going to force you to come to the table, and let's talk about what's fair to you and what's fair to the American people who have been getting ripped off. And yet people are having a problem with that. There's also the issue of national security that Mr. Miller was pointing out, because he said, what happens if, for instance, you export all your steel, you've allowed your steel industry to go to other nations, your automobile industry, your manufacturing industry. In wartime, if you're dependent upon another nation, you've put your own nation at risk. And so we must get back our manufacturing bases, and we must make it profitable for American jobs, American workers, to succeed. And I'll just throw a third point in, and then I want to hear from you, because I know this is a nuanced and multi-layered and kind of a volatile issue, to say the least. But I would just say this. Tell me what president in our lifetime is more qualified to talk about economic policy, not from an ivory tower perspective, but somebody who's actually in real life built successful businesses, understands what it takes to make economies hum. He inherited an absolute disastrous economy from Biden, and he has a plan to turn that around. We've already seen gas prices go down. We've already seen egg prices go down. We've already seen inflation go down, but we still have this massive deficit and a lot of problems, and he has a plan to remedy that. Now, even to his credit, he said, you know what, we're going to go through some rough times, but stay the course. So it's like, this isn't even surprising him, the responses and what's going on in the stock market. This man's very familiar with the stock market. That's his world. So if anybody understands how the system works, it would be Donald Trump. And I, for one, who am not, an economist, and I'm not somebody who has invested heavily in the stock market, and I'm not a billionaire, but I do respect people who do know that world, who know it better than I, and who have been entrusted to do what's right for our country. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at people taking pot shots at Trump, like, he's going to destroy our economy. Do you really think that's what he wants to do? Do you really think he wants to destroy our economy? No, he doesn't want to destroy our economy. He has a plan that is a workable plan to actually bring jobs back, secure our national security, and create wealth, to bring the wealth that's been going out to all these other nations, bring it back to the United States, which is where it comes from. And so I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm believing that we're moving in a way that eventually things are going to correct, and we're going to see, long-term anyway, blessing. I'll say one more thing, and I won't let you talk. I promise. But here's the other thing. When you are fixing a systemically broken economic system, all of these cuts are painful. Mm-hmm. No one else had the courage to do it, but Donald Trump's doing it. When you're looking at cutting out waste, fraud, and abuse and exposing all of this stuff, it's going to hit the fan. You're going to be unpopular, but no one else had the courage to do it. But Donald Trump is doing it, and when you do something like these tariffs to force our international trade partners to the table to say, you know what, this is wrong, and we're going to upset the apple cart. 50 years, this is the way you've been doing business, but we're not doing this any longer. Of course, there's going to be disruption. Of course, there's going to be some bumps in the road, and he said that would happen, and so I'm all in the sense that I'm already watching people come to the table that recognize this is going to be economic disaster, not for us. We're too much of an economic powerhouse. It's going to be economic disaster for you if you do not come to the table and renegotiate the current state of, the status quo.
Yeah.
Now, I do know there's some other voices, and you've read extensively.
Well, I read it, and mostly I listen to as many as I can, and the more I listen, the more I'm like, I am not an expert in this. But I think I resonate with your point. Not only is Trump himself a business person who has a level of success and production and manufacturing and equities and stuff like that, his cabinets are not career politicians. Yeah. They are not community organizers. Scott Bessent is, I don't even know what he did, but he became very, very successful. I mean, he's close to being a billionaire because of understanding macroeconomics and managing bonds and whatever else he does. Howard Lutnick's Interior Secretary, also very, very successful people. Not even talking about guys like Elon Musk. These are people who produce things. They're people who create the wealth. They're not just career. See, this is how I envision the founding father sees people who go into government, is that they prove themselves in the real world test, like not the artificial world called DC. Or even academics, where people talk about ideas and theories and they get tenure, so they don't really have to. Okay, I'm being a little harsh right here.
No, you're not. You're being accurate.
In the marketplace, you have to produce. It's a harsh place, survival of the fittest, and you have to produce, and you have to. I'm not saying all these guys were unscrupulous. I don't know what they did in their business, but they at least have a degree
it's real world.
Yes, there's an expertise to what they're doing. It's been tested.
And I will add that our founders also had a part-time legislature because nobody was supposed to be a career politician. Yeah. Like. You did that to help organize things and help our country, but you went back home and you ran your farm or you ran your business and you were connected to the real world. Some of this stuff, again, is just Ivy League, nonsense. As you said, Barack Obama's qualification for office was he was a Marxist community organizer. He's never had a job. He's never run a business. And we could go down the list. AOC, Bernie Sanders. I mean, Chuck Schumer's been a career politician. Nancy Pelosi, career politician. Mitch McConnell, career politician. It goes on both sides of the aisle. But the point is, at some point, some of the best people to lead us are people who realize you have to have a balanced budget. You have to actually produce a product. You have to demonstrate excellence. You have to get things done. And so I am grateful that that's who are making these kinds of decisions.
Yeah, I don't think they're making, and a lot of these cabinets, they're making these decisions, but they at their own cost. A lot of their net worth are taking a big hit, but they recognize that this is what's important to get us to the next level. So that gives me a level, despite all the things I don't know, that gives me a level of confidence. And there's another issue I think we haven't talked about yet, is this crazy debt we're in.
Right.
And again, how do you manufacture? We got crazy debt. We're trying to fix the economy. You're trying to stimulate the economy. You're trying to bring manufacture. How do you do all this? And again, I don't even understand all the nuances, but people talk, but tariff obviously brings in added revenue. But there is also the element of hopefully reducing the interest rate. So when we refinance the debt, it'll be way more affordable for I think it's like how many trillions we have to is due at the end of the year, whatever it is. Again, I don't know the specific numbers. So there's so many different factors going on one time. And you're right. Everyone likes to talk about the debt. Everyone likes to talk about the diminishing middle class. Who is actually going to do something about it? And Absolutely. That's another part that makes me recognize that, like if it's easy and clean cut, you do it in a way that no one's going to be upset and no one's going to protest. Someone would have done it a long time ago.
Yeah,
Why is no one doing it?
This takes guts.
It's messy.
This takes guts, and I also appreciate the fact, I get so sick and tired of people talking about we're being governed by billionaires. The fact that they made $1 billion, first of all, you should not penalize them for it unless they robbed, stole, cheated. You should celebrate the fact that these folks have contributed to our society. Like, does anybody go to Bill Gates and say, oh, Bill Gates is a billionaire? Bill Gates created Microsoft and computers that people willingly buy, and he's blessed the world. So have all these other folks. So we should be going, the fact that they have enough money that trust me, they're going to be able to retire and pretty much live the way that they want to live. I'm being facetious. They got so much money that's not an issue any longer. We should not be concerned that all these things are somehow benefiting them. We should be concerned with bartenders with no money come to Washington and now they're millionaires. That's who you should be concerned about. I also, I want to point out a couple of things here. South Korea, who we protect militarily, Japan, Canada, and Europe. We protect and defend them. And yet in all these places, we do not have American products for the most part, especially in the automobile industry. I saw a guy that was interviewed. He's in the food industry in the South, in the Gulf area. He's a shrimper. 94% of shrimp in America that are consumed are imported from other countries, and we're not getting the best brand of shrimp, trust me, from those countries. A lot of times it's the leftovers, and a lot of times there's chemicals added and those types of things. And he was saying he was excited because this is going to bring the shrimping industry back to the United States of America. So anyway, I'm excited about all of those things. I also like this quote from Stephen Miller. He said, Americans should not have to compete with child slave wages in Vietnam. And that's exactly right. We should not be having all these tariffs on our product and then they're able to use slave labor to produce something that we're forced to buy. When we should be paying American workers and we should be, helping them produce great products and helping them have a great living.
Okay, and even on that, so people are like, well, things are going to cost more. And my whole thing is like, and maybe I'm the wrong person to talk about this. Like, okay, so maybe things will cost more because now you're not having slave labor created. You're having American working class produce it. It should cost more. And maybe we can deal with some of the materialism in our country today because we buy more things than we ever need. And maybe that will be part of the solution too. It's like consumerism is not necessarily a good thing too. So it ties into all these different areas, Yeah. So I don't know.
No, I hear you. And what Miller was saying, too, is that we're not only going to be able to bring these things back, but because of our technology, it's actually energy saving, it's efficient, and we're going to be able to lower the cost on some of these things.
So that's the other factor is there's people who says that advent in AI is going to create so much capital, so much innovation that the cost will go away. I mean, who knows, right? You're going to create robots who can cut your grass for you. I don't know. But that's all part of this whole technology and
debate,
AI and labor costs. But I mean, these are very real problems that not everyone, but people talk about a lot, and no one really has a solution for it.
Well, I just remember back when Barack Obama was president and people were lamenting the fact that all of our industrial jobs are going overseas. And he said, well, that's just the reality you're going to have to get used to. Well, I love the fact that Donald Trump comes along and says, no, that's not a reality. That's only been created because politicians have created that world. We don't have to live that way. We can bring these things back. And again, the focus is on America first, on protecting our citizens, which again, we're getting back to biblical worldview. That's the job of a political leader, is to take care of the people that they have been elected to lead and to serve. That's fundamentally what it means to be an elected official. You make sure that the United States of America and the interest of this country and its people are priority number one. I mean, that's not rocket science. You're not a globalist, which brings me up to some more good news. The World Health Organization is $2.5 billion in debt. Yay! Let's get rid of this terrible, terrible organization.
Is it because we stopped paying for their bills?
Well, part of it is. Yeah, the United States, this is mind-boggling to me. First of all, we gave $1.3 billion to the World Health Organization in the fiscal year of 2022, 2023. I would ask this question, where does that money go? That is a lot of money. how do they spend that money globally? I mean, that would be an interesting audit, which is just crazy. So we're stopping that nonsense. But I love when my namesake, Ron Johnson, not me, but Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, he said the WHO proved itself to be a corrupt organization run by the Chinese Communist Party and by global leftists. Much of the leadership supported China. They were also anti-Israel in so many ways. And basically, so what's the biblical worldview issue here? Well, here's the issue. We should not be handing over American sovereignty to unelected global bureaucrats who try to, from a top-down position, force us to do certain things that were not agreed upon by the American people. In other words, hey, this is what the World Health Organization says you have to do regarding vaccines. Everybody jump in. No, that's not your decision. That's our decision. And so I'm so glad that this organization and so many other organizations that really are globalists in their orientation are being we're removing our involvement, which is really good. Johnson said this: we don't want to be governed by an international institution. We want our national sovereignty. And the WHO is just part of the one world order, a group of institutions that would threaten that sovereignty and America's national self-determination. Last month, Trump announced it had withheld U.S. payments to the World Trade Organization, the United Nations Population Fund, which is a rabid pro-abortion group, United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, which we saw was just a terrorist organization, a shell organization that was not helping with relief at all, but was attacking Israel. So those are things that he got rid of. And I love this. Senator Johnson hoped the free nations of the world would one day form a successor to the World Health Organization, an international organization of liberty-respecting nations, quote, that could manage health crises effectively, but the WHO is not it. And I would just say a big amen to that one. So that's good news. The WHO is going broke, and they won't be able to torment us globally, hopefully in the very near future, at least for the next 4 years. Let's talk about some other stuff that's happening, though, that's equally concerning. First of all, let's go overseas, because, when J.D. Vance gave his first speech out of the gate, right over in Europe, he really took the Europeans to the woodshed because of their terrible free speech, religious liberty abuses. And here's another example, all right? The latest evidence. This is a woman, a 64-year-old woman in Great Britain, I believe, whose crime was standing in proximity to an abortion facility with a sign reading, ready for this, hold your breath, quote, "Here to talk if you want." So on the sign, she's standing there quietly, "Here to talk if you want." That is her messaging to men and women who are entering an abortion mill. She's not talking out loud. She's not blocking. She's not violent. She's not aggressive. She just is quietly holding a sign. Basic free speech. I'm here to talk if you want. That sign was viewed to violate a British law called the Anti-Social Behavior, Crime and Policing Act of 2014. She said that the court said she lacks insight that her presence could have a detrimental effect on women attending the clinics, their associates, staff, and members of the public. As a consequence, she was given a 2-year conditional discharge, similar to probation, and a fine of £20,000, which right now is over $25,000. That's a 64-year-old lady who's being fined by her nation to the tune of $25,000 for simply holding up a sign. This should be incredibly terrifying for all of us, because what happens in Europe is many times a harbinger of what's coming this way. And so it leads me to one other thing that we should all be deeply concerned about. This was the House in I guess it was the Colorado House of Representatives. They passed a bill in the House that would remove kids from parents' custody for behaviors like misgendering and dead naming. Of course, misgendering is if you and I as dads say to our child, we call our son a him when he wants to be a her. we are guilty of misgendering or dead naming. If our son was Tommy and he wants to now be called Tammy, but we call him Tommy instead, our children could be removed if Denver has its way. Your children would be removed from your house. I mean, this is unbelievable. A massive parental rights and religious liberty trampling, and suggesting this is what I guess is really, really concerning. Is it would be taken to the courts, and the courts would determine whether or not you were guilty of coercive control, which they deem as dead naming, misgendering, or threatening to publish material related to a child's gender-affirming health care services. So this is scary, scary stuff, because basically now the courts are in charge of how you raise your family. And one wrong move from a parent is viewed as basically a hate crime against your kids. One Democrat compared the parental rights groups that are concerned simply with protecting the God-given rights of parents, they compared them to the Ku Klux Klan. So that's some pretty strong language right there. Basically, if you disagree with gender ideology, you're guilty of child abuse. Right here, a court shall consider reports of coercive control when determining the allocation of parental responsibilities in accordance with the best interest of the child. Who should have the best interest of the child in mind? I would think the parents would. Who cares about your kids more than the ones who birthed them, right, and gave them life? So once again, a clear biblical pattern here. Children don't belong to the courts. Children don't ultimately belong to parents. Children belong to the Lord. They're a gift from God, and parents have the responsibility before God to raise these children. But if we lose God and we lose the biblical worldview, we're in big, big trouble. And so fortunately, this has just gone through the House. It still has to go through the Senate. But this thing I can tell you is going to be hit with a lot of lawsuits, because this would represent, as they called it, the crossing of the Rubicon as it relates to trampling of parental rights.
Yeah, well, and not just parental rights, but First Amendment rights, right to free speech. Because if they would do that to take your kids away from a parent's perspective, what happened if you just do it in school? What happened if you're a teacher? I'm just imagining if you're a teacher. Well, you get a fire and tartan and feather from misgendering someone in Colorado? I don't even know.
Okay, imagine you live in Colorado and you're raising your kids. I mean, my son lives in Colorado and raising 4 beautiful grandchildren. And let's just say you go to send your kids to the public school. Maybe you can't afford private school or whatever. And all of a sudden your kids start being introduced to all kinds of crazy stuff, and your daughter comes home and thinks she's a boy or thinks she's a cat or whatever it is. And if you say anything to go against that and it's reported to a school official, that child, not only that child, but all your children at that point are taken out of your household, because your household is viewed as a terrible, horrible, place where your kids are not safe to be themselves or whatever. And we talked about this on previous podcasts, this removal of biological reality and drifting over into a feelings-based, subjective, whatever you think you are type of reality it's not reality at all. It's a fairy tale world. Last thing I want to hit on is this courageous woman who happens to be a fencer. She was competing at the college level in the sport of fencing, and she saw that she was going to end up having to fight a transgender identifying man, and she decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and stay in until it's my turn to be introduced, and then I'm going to take the knee at the start of our fight, and I'm going to willingly surrender to this individual. In other words, she realized, I'm going to make a point of this and call out the injustice. She was very respectful. She took a knee and, quote, she said, "I'm sorry to her opponent and to the ref. I'm sorry, I cannot do this. I am a woman, and this is a man. And this is a women's tournament. I will not fence this individual." And what happened was, in an instant, the black card was slammed down, which is the harshest penalty one can face in fencing. effectively banishing her from the bout. She was hauled before the committee. She was handed a copy of the trans policy. She was forced to sign a document acknowledging her punishment, and only moments later, she was kicked out of the tournament entirely. So much for tolerance and love and all that good stuff that the left promotes. But here's what I'm excited about. All-American swimmer Riley Gaines shared on X, women should capital B-O-Y, boycott any event match game against a man. This is the way. And I wholeheartedly agree. If that would happen across America, this nonsense would end in a second. Tennis legend Martina Navratilova, who is no conservative, she said, this is what happens when female athletes protest. Anyone here still thinks this is fair? ? I am fuming. And shame on the USA fencing. Shame on you for doing this. How dare you throw women under the gender bus? And journalist Megyn Kelly and famous author J.K. Rowling hailed Turner as a heroine, amplifying the chorus of voices rallying behind her cause. So this is still a massive, massive battle, as we know. Yeah. But I do believe that we're starting to see some courageous women stand up, and I do believe it's going to come. This is a perfect example of worldview collision, right? There's no compromise. When you have two worldviews that start at opposing assumptions about reality, in this case, what it means to be a man or woman, you cannot come together any more than the agreement on abortion. If that is a life, then I don't care what you say, there are no grounds for terminating that human life as someone made in the image and likeness of God Almighty. So the pro-abortion camp with the pro-life camp, they cannot come together. Their worldviews are in collision. This happens on so many issues, and when politicians pretend like we can somehow find common ground, they're confused. There isn't common ground, and I think this is being exposed. Either men are men and women are women, or we can enter into some strange world where you can create whatever identity you want to create, but that is fundamentally unlivable. And so we're going to have to come and make a ruling on this because we can't keep going on like this. And these states that are resisting President Trump and his executive order on men and women in sports, eventually it's going to be tested. You know, are they going to be allowed to keep doing that, or is there going to be a price to pay? And we'll see. But anyway, great stuff happening and plenty of stuff for us to talk about each week.
We're simply subscribing to the opinion of the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. So that's all I got to say about that. I'm bringing it out as many times as I can.
Well, just got to throw this one out. You know, there's a lot of people interested in the governor's seat in the state of California, which is a dumpster fire right now in debt, and it's a cesspool. But Kamala Harris, I read, she's not down and out. She's ready to throw her hat in the ring. And all I can say is, if California would elect that woman to be the leader of their state, God help California. It would go from bad to worse. It would go from terrible to unbelievable. If that's what you guys want, man, I pray. I just pray for election integrity so that we get an honest elections coming out of California, and we can really see what the people really want. Well, I think we've kicked enough hornet's nests today. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. We appreciate you guys watching. We'll look forward to being with you, Lord willing, next Thursday. Hope to see you this Sunday at Living Stones.